All right, then we showed you Alex and Carrie Davis Muir. My middle name's Michael Davis, and then we still have that name going on in the family. The Davis comes from Carrie Davis, my great-grandfather's wife, maiden name. Then this was Floyd Davis, and my dad was Richard Davis, but this is Granny and Granddad. I think probably a lot of you knew them, Floyd and Evan. My grandmother was very active in the community and did a lot of things. She, if you didn't know her, you probably heard about her. So she was a huge Stockton promoter. She was big in the Christian church, and she was probably on every committee they had in the time. Granddad, all he liked to do was work and maybe drink coffee with his buddies. He didn't really care about history, but she did. Her, and I don't think I've said this yet, who taught me the most about history was Dr. Leo Oliva. I had him for a course in college in Kansas history, and he was an amazing professor. And he knows history, and we all know that. Rook County's privileged to have him. And my grandmother and Don Unruh, Stockton High School. I really took to him, and of course he was a World War II Marine, and I enjoyed a lot of World War II history from him and so on. And then we're really privileged to have Roger here. He's quite a historian. So Rook County's had a lot of historians, but they've really got two that have been outstanding. But Dr. Oliva, he's amazing. And I mean, if you've read his books that he's written, about every family that ever was around here is in there. And I imagine he's still doing history. Yeah.
So Floyd married Bartlett, so that Bartlett land all up there, he married a neighbor girl, huh?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Got it.
He was 6 years ahead of Granny, and he had to ask my grandmother's brother, Leonard Bartlett, who just lived a half-mile away. He went over to ask him if he could get lined up to meet my grandma. I think my grandpa was pretty shy. He was just a farmer. He did her by hand, and he worked, when he wasn't farming, he worked in the oil patch. So anyway, they had quite a love affair, and they were married a long, long time. So you can go on to the next one there. This is Dick and Jack. They're getting ready for church. And I know everybody knew Dick. And then, of course, Jack, he was real popular, and he lived around here a long time. Yeah. I imagine Dick was kind of ornery in his younger day, I think. But, I know one thing, if they could get out and go to church, to the Christian church in Stockton, they went there. So, before the Christian church in Stockton, Granny and the Muirs and all them, not all the Muirs, but some of the Muirs, there was a church over by the cemetery east of J.D. Riffle. There was a church right across the road, and they had a country church out there. And it burnt down, and then at least my grandmother and a bunch of them and great-grandmother started going into the Christian church, and I think I'm sure Lee and all them and Florence all went there.
Across the road to the west of the cemetery?
Yep.
Oh, we don't.
Don Riffle owns that, of course. J.D. Riffle lives there, but yeah. There was a lot of history. Like I said, them families are still around, so yeah.
What church did they have in Scotland?
Presbyterian. That was a huge church in there. Yeah. Scotland broke into all the Presbyterian, Episcopalian, and all that after the Mary Queen of Scots got beheaded. She was on the Catholic side, and they all changed religion. So it's all politics. I don't know much about it. Don't want to know too much. Back then, you didn't. If you mouthed off the Queen of England, you probably weren't around too long. So anyway, Presbyterian and a lot of Episcopalian back then. And I think that Elam Bartholomew, I would guess, he was had to be a Presbyterian, and either went to Phillipsburg or come to Stockton.
Well, they built a Presbyterian church right out there close to his farm.
Okay, up on Bow Creek there.
Yeah.
I always wondered, when you were giving that, I didn't ask you, but I always wondered about that.
He was big on the Presbyterian, and then they went around and started a lot of Presbyterian churches.
Right. Well, wasn't there one in Stockton way back when? Does anybody know, Roger? A Presbyterian? I mean, we always had Methodist, Christian, Catholic, and the Congregationalist and the Baptist, but I was thinking there might have been a Presbyterian way back when. But I don't know. It doesn't matter. None of us in this room were alive then to even worry about it anyway. But I find I'm kind of a culture buff, as you can tell. I like that kind of stuff. But anyway, that's Dick and Jack, and Dad was always a farmer. You can go on to the next slide. And here's a picture of the family homestead that Brother Pat owns, and that's where Floyd Neville lived. And before them, Alex and Mrs. Muir lived there. So this is that today. And that, they own 3/4 of that section. Riffles farmed this, have forever. So, pretty nice looking farm. It's all changed. These barns have all rotted down now, patched, torn down, and just a few of the buildings are left. But when I was a kid, that was quite a farm. Everybody kept, like I said, they had silos, kept their yards up pretty nice. And but that's been our immediate family for a long, long time. And that's the one right across from the stone house from where Kelly Muir lives. It's just a mile straight over. Or not, pretty straight. So that, like I said, my grandpa, he wasn't near as aggressive as Scotty was. He enjoyed smoking his pipe and doing custom harvesting and enjoyed all the neighbors. He was more like that, but he was a very good farmer, and actually on 3/4 he had a fair amount of cows back in that day. Of course, like I say, every quarter had a fence around it. So that was when the fence was good. Now 150 years later, everybody's fixes fence every day. Still fixing it, right? So anyway, that's cool, and I have a lot of fond memories growing up there. And my dad, when he got into farming with granddad, they built a lot of extra corrals down here, and we used to work the cattle there and keep them there to winter during calving season. We fed them in bushel baskets of silage. We carried it from the silo to the bunk. Whether snow was 10 feet deep or whatever, you still fed them every day. But this big barn, I'm old enough to remember we had square bales of alfalfa up here, and we'd open the doors, and sometimes there was so much snow you could just get it over to this corral over here to feed the cows. And then the old wire balers, you better have a pair of pliers with you, because you had to cut the wire. But the cattle got fed. And this was the milk barn. This is where they always milk cows in here. So that wasn't on my speech originally, but I thought everybody would find that a little interesting. Most of you remember this farmstead. It's still a nice farmstead. Pat's got stuff out there. He's built a new shed. And Heathy's boy raises pigs out there now. So it's still going. So you can move on to the next one then, Roger. All right, then we get down. You see Nick and Jack, and then I'll tell you about this one. In it's actually 1952, but Dad married Mom, Nancy Levine, and they had 5 children. Mike, Dana, Brad, John, and Pat. So I think all of you know us probably, or if you don't, heard of us. And then after Granddad died, Dick farmed all of Floyd Muir's ground, plus his own, plus a lot of rented ground. So he farmed that, and then Brother Brad started farming with him, and they farmed all that ground and added to it and then bought more ground. And then Brad farmed with, Dad passed away in 2012, and then Brad, his son Tyler, I don't have a picture of Tyler here, they farmed the ground until 2016 when Brad passed away. This is Brad. I think a lot of you remember him probably. And then today the land is farmed by Tyler Muir and Pat Muir. So the Muir name's still out there. And then we got Royce and Burl and Kelly and Andy farming right across next to us. So everything's still, there's been land change hands, there's been land sell. I mean, there's been things changed, but still quite a few quarters of ground if you put it all together. So my grandpa ended up, he owned 8 quarters and rented 2, so he farmed 10 quarters. But when Dad got at his prime, he was up to 25 quarters that he owned and rented, and increased the cow herd from 75 to about 200 head. So Tyler and those guys are still doing that. Plus they've added some more rented ground. I mean, but we worked. If you weren't working, you better be doing something. there wasn't too much of loafing around. And back then, when I was a kid, and everybody in there probably remembers, if you got lucky enough to get off the farm and go to town with your mom to get groceries on Saturday, everybody liked to go get groceries on Saturday. And a lot of farmers got haircuts on rainy days. You got to go to the Nova Theater and watch a show for $0.25. Popcorn was a dime. But every kid you hadn't seen all summer, from Woodston and Stockton and Webster, about everybody come to the show. And it was kind of a social outing per se. So that continued for a long time. But yeah, my dad, he taught me a lot, and he was genuine. Everything he got, he made to operate. Brad was probably one of the first no-till farmers, completely no-till farmers in Rook County. he had a planter and planted milo in the wheat stubbles in the late 70s. And I remember the World Farms from Kerwin come down to watch him, and it was even a dry year, and he raised some 80 bushel milo, which back then was amazing. I mean, there wasn't, if there ever was 100 bushel milo, it was damn far and few between. But so Brad and then Dad picked up on that real good, and they had some good years with that. Now everybody in the neighborhood, that's the only way we can farm. With the labor and the moisture situation, this spring it's gonna be really important to no-till, so. Anyway, that's a lot of it, and I'm real proud of my heritage, and I grew up and we had a wonderful life. We had neighbor kids in Lanark Township. All the kids played together, the parents would meet and have coffee and play cards. And you didn't go in the house when you was a kid, you better entertain yourself outside. There wasn't no cell phones and boom boxes or none of that. And if you weren't outside, you were told to get outside. I think y'all could relate to that. So, anyway, that's about what I've got here today, and I think it tells you a lot. I mean, we're truly students from Scotland, 100%, all clear through and through, except me. Mom was a Swede, so I got some Swede in me, but Dad was 99% Scottish, as is Earl and Lewis and all the Muirs. And we've all been good friends, and we've all been close. Dad and Lee, or Granddad and Lee were very good friends. Royce's grandpa and Dad and Earl they were always together. So it's Royce and I are great friends, and Brad and Earl were good friends, and hopefully it's still going on. So we did have a lot of fun times.